All right, we will now call the meeting of the Waco City Council on February 21st, 2023 to order at 3:02 in the p.m. If you would just join me for a moment of silence.
I didn't know about that one. I wouldn't have been able to come.
All right. We want to recognize any work session speakers. We provide an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on any agenda item or during the hearing of visitors portion of the agenda. On items other than public hearing, speakers will be allotted 1 3-minute presentation regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. If you are here to speak and have not filled out a registration card, please see the City Secretary's staff at the registration table outside of the auditorium to provide registration information so that staff can contact you. If you have handouts, please let us know at the beginning of your presentation, and staff will distribute those to council. If you are unable to approach the podium due to physical limitations, a microphone is available to be brought to you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on a work session agenda item today? All right. Seeing no one is registered to speak, we will now recess the regular session and convene to work session with a report from the City Manager. City Manager Ford.
Good afternoon, Council, and all the viewing public. We've got a great session today for you. A lot of great informative work sessions. I want to start out, though, to say a word of thanks to Mayor Pro Tem Borderud for stepping up today in his leadership and let the public know we did have to rebalance the entire audio system to deal with your baritone voice.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
So far, it's very crisp and beautiful. So we
did.
Thanks, Alice. We do have two recognitions of employees today. I'll start off with a retirement. I believe we've got David Litke in the room. David, do you mind standing up for a moment? I wanted to say a special thanks to David. He is retiring after 27 years of service to the City of Waco, retiring in March, I believe. He has dedicated his entire career to ensuring the health and safety of the residents of Waco and even McLennan County while he's served as the Environmental Health Division Manager. He's overseen the administration of our on-site sewage facilities program as well as the environmental health program. That's the group that provides inspections to restaurants, daycares, schools, food trucks, pools and spas, and everything in between, hotels even. David has used his knowledge and expertise of the Texas Health and Safety Code to guide the work of his division and to ensure that the vision, mission, and values of the city remain the driving force of the work that he and his team do. And I just think we ought to spend a moment saying thank you for his service. Big shoes to fill there. We're also celebrating a new employee who's sitting right next to David. Very convenient. Marissa Zaniga, will you please stand up? Marissa started, when was it? It couldn't be but a week or two ago. Monday, in our neighborhood engagement office. She's working with Millette. She's our new program coordinator. Marissa is born and raised Waco, Texas, right? Went to University High and earned her bachelor's degree in international studies from, I don't remember the name of the school, but they say whoop a lot. Yeah, Texas A&M. Is it? Yeah. Prior to coming to the city of Waco, Marissa was an intern at Walt Disney and a marketing consultant for Prophecy Media Group. Wow. Very excited to have Marissa on the team with Millette, and if you don't mind extending her a warm welcome as well.
Look happy at all. Did you see her happy dance over there?
Disney rubbing off. Right? Great agenda, as I mentioned earlier, Council. We do have 3 informal reports today. I'm just going to highlight one briefly. It's IR 110, and it's update on Winter Storm Uri, the after-action report. Really wanted to highlight the results, which show us to be 92% complete or substantially complete on the findings of the after-action report. We're working through a few remaining items that delayed either by budgetary impacts or supply chain disruptions. But I'll tell you this, the work of that after-action report helps us. It helped us in the recent cold weather, and it remains just a real bright spot as I look at plans that you don't want to sit on the shelf. You want to see them activated and operationalized, and this is definitely one that I'm proud of, and want to give a real strong kudos to Assistant City Manager Ryan Holt for leading out and ensuring that we were thoughtful and methodical and have made changes to react to the Winter Storm Uri. Thanks, Ryan.
Bradley, if I could say something, not just on this report, but I want to thank all our city employees that were out during the winter storm and the ice and all that. I want to thank them personally for doing that. I know it's a dangerous job, but our City of Waco employees did a tremendous job, and I think we need to recognize that effort as well. Everybody's happy. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just what it took to, many had to stay over in proximity, because one, for safety reasons, but two, just to make sure that they were able to get and be immediate in response to what we needed. Thankfully it wasn't as severe as we've seen, but the preparedness was exactly what we needed. The items that happened and were produced in the after action from Uri, were put in place and immediately deployed, and so we appreciate our emergency services team for that, for their thoughtfulness, for their thoroughness, and for the completeness to protect and be available for our residents.
Yeah, I'll echo Councilmember Bearfield on that. Just the fact that as it was happening, I think we responded remarkably well, but we found all these takeaways on page 84. You can see just a little summary of 110 things we identified that we could do, that we could possibly do better. And I commend Assistant City Manager Holt on not only just in the aftermath of this, but because it's going to happen again, in our lifetimes here, that we'll have this kind of event, and the city will be even better prepared than it was last time. So, Ryan, thanks for the work you did and the follow-up. Because a lot of times this happens, and then this kind of stuff kind of goes away, but we're keeping track on this deal. And I was also happy to see the demonstration of remarkable restraint that we didn't order 5 new snowplows, to take care of our next snow drift. But anyway, very good report. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hear, hear. Amen to all of those comments. Thanks to city staff and our annual preparedness now for these events. I think we're just really building on, going from strength to strength as we continue to improve and prepare.
We do have council 7 public hearings on the agenda today. I'm going to have Clint Peters, Development Service Director, cover those here in, I guess it'll be about an hour and a half or so in the work session. We have a total of 27 resolutions on the agenda and 1 ordinance, which is a second reading on the agenda today. And out of respect for our time and our remaining speakers, that's going to conclude my report today, and I'll take any questions that you might have of me.
I don't have any comments. I just wanted to throw out 2 attaboys. And every time I see where we save money, 60,000 on resolution 152 and another 60,000 on 154, I just want to say good job watching the budget, watching the bottom line. I appreciate it. That's all I had.
Right. I will now move on to our work session items. We've got work session 2023. 112, discussion of the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2022. City Manager Ford.
Thanks, Josh. We have Katie King from JRBT as well as Nick Sarpy, our Chief Financial Officer, coming to the table today to give us a presentation. I did want to note for those watching, a full copy of the audit is available on our website if you want to dive into it, as well as attached to the agenda item, agenda link that's posted. So Katie, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, Council. Thank you for having me today. I'm here to present the results of your 2022 audit and the annual comprehensive financial report. So we're going to start today talking about your single audit results. We'll go over touch on some required communications from the auditor to you as those charged with governance, some financial audit results, and then take any questions that you may have. Just as a reminder, you were subject to a single audit because the city spends over $750,000 in federal and state funding. So the first thing we've done is list for you as a reminder the major programs that were part of this year's audit. So for the state program, we looked at the Texas Anti-Gang Program through your Texas Office of Governor. And their federal programs, we had the Airport Improvement Program. You'll notice the asterisk at the end of that is because, as a reminder, they had over 50% of their funding that was COVID related. So even though we've looked at that the past couple of years, it continues to remain on the agenda for testing. Under Department of Agriculture, we looked at the WIC program this year. And then in addition, for Department of Treasury, obviously 100% of that was COVID related, but it was the state and local fiscal recovery funds. And then the Health and Human Services, we looked at the immunization cooperative agreements, which this one became large specifically because of the COVID vaccines that were expended during 2022. In terms of overall spend for the year, you had about $24.2 million of federal expenditures that are represented in this pie chart. And again, we've broken this down by granting authority so you can see pictorially how your funds are expended. For transportation, airport represents about half of that 45% pie. The state and local fiscal recovery funds were about 90% of the treasury, the balance being some emergency rental assistance programming. Agriculture was 100% WIC, and then health was about 30% of that was the immunization funding that was all subject to single audit this year. HUD and housing was tested in a prior year. As a comparison from 2021 to 2022, we present this graph just so you can see changes by those same granting agencies. I'll just note Health and Human Services had that increase due to the COVID vaccines. Housing and Urban Development decreased a little bit due to a decrease in the lead-based paint expenditures and some reductions in the rehabilitation projects. Transportation had increases both for airport and the CARES funding there, as well as the Historic Elm pedestrian infrastructure project and the J.H. Hines sidewalks that are both part of that. And Treasury represents a flip from emergency rental assistance in 2021 to the state and local fiscal recovery funds in 2022. Overall, for your single audit, we are reporting a clean or unmodified opinion that said that the city complied in all material respects with both federal and state programs that were tested this year. We also had no material weaknesses to report specific to the programs, no instances of material noncompliance. And then specific to the passenger facility charge compliance that we test for the airport, there were no findings to report there either. You received in your packet also a letter to council that is those required communications that we present as your auditors. It included items such as discussing significant estimates and disclosures, explain that we had full cooperation of management and no significant disagreements there. Also attached to that letter is management's representations to us, everything that they attested in order for us to conclude the audit, as well as a summary of uncorrected misstatements, which are there for your information. Those have been discussed with management. There was nothing unusual, significant, or unexpected in those reports. In terms of the financial audit, we had one new accounting standard that I wanted to highlight, which was the implementation of GASB 87 for leases. This required the presentation of right-of-use lease assets and liabilities, as well as some deferred inflows for lessor agreements. And then it pretty significantly expanded disclosures related to leases as well. I will say there was no net position impact. It was essentially assets equal liabilities on your ultimate financial statements. But that has been implemented for the fiscal year. There's also two new major governmental funds that are presented for street improvements and grants. And you'll notice if you look through the details of the financial statements that there's some reconciliations that kind of show the adjustment in presentation from 2021 to 2022. But those are presented separately this year. You did have your debt issuance, which we've listed here, both the certificates of obligation and the refunding bonds. Each one of those is allocated to the funds that are listed there. The new this year is the Drainage Fund, which received an allocation of your certificates of obligation. And just so you know, the wastewater and WMARS, they're presented as one fund in the annual comprehensive financial report. Management does track those separately, but they are rolled together in just the wastewater fund for ultimate reporting. Your pension liability for the year, as a reminder, these are measured at December 31st on a calendar year basis. It decreased $14 million to an $11 million balance at year end. This does have assets associated with it, so the change is based on actuarial assumptions and the return on assets for that measurement period. The total pension liability is split among water, wastewater, solid waste, and then the ultimate governmental activities for the year. The OPEB, or other post-employment benefits liability, is also measured at a calendar year end. It increased the $107,000 to a $2.4 million balance. This liability has no assets in the plan, and so its changes are solely driven by changes in actuarial assumptions. This is valued every 2 years. In 2021 calendar year here was the last full valuation that was performed. All of this liability is reported as governmental activities. A few financial observations. This graph just shows you an increase in your total net position from 2021 to 2022 with a 5-year historical total presented. Your governmental activities ended at $449 million. The business type ended at about $475 million. Increases of roughly $50 million in both year over year. So the continued trend upward there. For general fund specifically, 2022 ended with a $95.8 million fund balance, which was a $3 million increase from 2021. You can see that overall the allocations among the categories of the general fund remained pretty consistent year over year as well. You have a few council-approved minimums or thresholds that we're presenting here. The first is the unassigned fund balance to budgeted revenues. And here your council approved, your orange line there is a 36%, that's your approved minimum. You ultimately ended the year at 36% above your 28% threshold there. For the enterprise funds, you have a limitation of working capital to revenues. The minimum here is 30%. You can see you're well over that still in all 3 of those major enterprise funds, ending 2022 at 65% for solid waste, 76% for wastewater, and 66% for water. All of these, the slight decrease from prior year is just because the revenue amounts increased in all of these funds from 21 to 22. Overall, you had a clean or unmodified opinion for the financial statements and all related opinion units as of and for the year ended September 30th, 2022. And we had no material weaknesses to report in overall internal controls, information technology general controls, and no material instances of noncompliance with the Yellow Book or the governmental accounting standards. We also have already issued our report to TCEQ for the landfill, so that has been completed, which was the last piece of our engagement letter. And then I just wanted to close by, again, thanking all of the financial management staff and really all areas of the city that got to deal with auditors for a few months. We appreciate all their cooperation and assistance in completing the engagement.
Thank you so much. Any questions from council?
I don't have a question. I'll just make a couple comments here. I've said on corporate audit committees before, and the magic words on this are clean, unmodified opinion, which I heard, no material weakness, no material deficiencies, and no material noncompliance. So I think we checked all those boxes, and it's great to have you guys, JRBT, Katie is a partner, audit partner. You've been one for quite some time. The reports are always great, and also Nick and Mr. Sarpy, Manager Sarpy, Director Sarpy, whatever you are. You're doing a great job, and I know it takes a lot of internal management to get these reports and all this information ready for the audit partner, so my hat's off to you too. We're managing a $1.7 billion balance sheet now, which is as big as this balance sheet for the city of Waco's ever been. And our operating budget, if you count the general fund and the major utilities, is right at $250 million. So it's not a small operation that we have here. And we have upwards of $500 million of capital improvement projects on top of that. So it's good to see that we have a strong financial position. If you saw the reserves on page 132 and 133, we've targeted 28%, and we actually have 36% cash reserves at the end of the year. And the ratios on page 133, the working capital to revenues, we're basically doubling the minimum requirements that we put in place. So I think we're in a very strong financial position. It's been validated now by JRBT. I feel good about that. And great report. Thanks.
I'd just like to say thank you to the staff for being so cooperative. It is great to hear that there were absolutely no disagreements and that everybody fully cooperated in getting to the point that we have gotten to here. So thank you, and thank you all your accountants for the same thing. Sometimes it doesn't work out this well.
All right. I'll add my voice to that chorus of gratitude. Thank you all, and we appreciate y'all coming in today. Thank you. Looks like our next work session agenda item is work session 2023-113, discussion and update on the airport terminal building modernization project. I see Director Joel Martinez coming down to lead us on.
Council, we're excited for Joel to present today an update on the terminal modernization project, which, as you've been seeing updates on, is well underway. It doesn't quite look like what you're seeing on this image. I'm excited for the public to see it and the council to hear the update, particularly keeping an eye out towards the high-quality art as well as a notable tribute to the native Waco tribe. I think there's some really neat examples that you're going to see today that show our history and show who we are. So, Joel, take us away.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So we're going to walk through the current project phases and schedule. We'll talk about kind of just a real brief summary of our budget. We'll talk about the progress of the terminal building project with some pictures. That's always the best way to kind of see progress when it comes to building. And then we'll talk about an update on the public art as well, kind of the timeline and sequence of what we have coming up. And then we'll just kind of briefly outline some of our future communication plans for the terminal project and airport operations. So here's our project schedule. You can see that on phase one, we're 70% complete there. We do have some material delay issues, but in order to recapture some of that time, we let them jump into phase 2 and phase 3. And we'll see some of those pictures, and then once we get those materials in, they'll be able to roll all those out and keep us on track for the final deadline. So as of today, again, these are those percentage markers there for that as well. Our original contract amount, which we brought to you, Council, in June, was for a little over $8.7 million. We did have one change order we brought to Council in December. So again, we're still at $8,997,086 for this project. So on to the pictures. Right? Some of you have come out and seen a tour, and we have a couple of others scheduled in coming weeks. And it'll change from what you're seeing today. They're doing some great work. This is the Gate 1 area. You can see there on the top, that's what our passengers used to look at when they used to come off the airplane off that boarding bridge. And obviously through construction and demolition, you can see some of those new, I guess the new finishes are starting to pop up there. This is another angle here coming in from the post art. Just as you're exiting security, again, you can see that old carpet and some of the dated furnishings there. And we do have furnishings already on site, so it's really exciting to kind of see some of that progress. And then this is that kind of a work counter area that we have between the vending and then the more relaxed lounge seating. And you can see some of that wall panel already taking shape there. You see that column that has that wood finish there as well. And then to let them get ahead, we let them jump into the baggage claim area and the public bathroom area. So you can see what it looked like, before the project, and within a week, of giving them the green light to jump into that phase. They had it fully demoed, and as of this morning, they already have the walls up for those bathrooms. So again, Hensel Phelps is doing a fantastic job staying on schedule with their folks. So now for the fun piece is our public art. Just kind of a reminder of what some of our objectives were for the public art. We wanted to display high quality public art that complements the airport project. We wanted to grow Waco's reputation and brand as a community that values and supports creativity and the arts. We also wanted to include elements that highlight Waco's distinct culture, diverse community, natural beauty, and attractions. And also provide a gateway to Waco that is impressive and distinctive and welcoming. Engage the local art community through this process. So we have I guess the first two art pieces we'll talk about are already under contract. And so we are coordinating with, between the artist and the contractor to install these. We hope to have these installed by August or by the completion of the project. One of these is the ceiling mounted art piece by a local artist, Bryant Stanton, and that's Flight Patterns there. And then the second piece is a life-size or 16-foot mammoth wall relief was the original concept, but Miss Monk Allen, she actually it's kind of like a woven piece. I know we've brought that to council before, so we're excited to see that process come along as well. And then for the next two pieces, one of them was a welcome walkway. That is going to be etched or going to be installed along a glass corridor as passengers are exiting the sterile area into the public area. And the anticipation was we're going to have welcome to Waco in many different forms and languages that are of our community around Waco. And so the process for these next two pieces are going to be an open call for design and proposals. We'll start that here in March. We'll set up 2 artistic review panels and selection in the first week of April, first or second week of April. And then we'll do interviews and final selection. We'll take a presentation April 13th to the advisory board, bring that recommendation back to council on May the 2nd, finalize that contract with artists, and then have them design that full design during the month of June and July, and then have that installed. And again, I'm not going to repeat the same schedule, but it's the same schedule for that Waco backdrop. Again, we wanted to kind of create this particular one. We wanted to kind of create a space where folks that were exiting, or passengers that were exiting the sterile area knew that they were in Waco once they kind of saw this wall mural. And we have some concepts that are there, but obviously we're going to let an artist kind of let them showcase their creativity in that space. And then in this space here, we have some milling work throughout the project. In the hold room, there we have the confluence of the Lake Brazos area through downtown, and then Lake Waco on one side. And the milling and the milling work that was proposed with this project included the ability to add this graphic. So the graphic over the baggage belt area had an opportunity for us to do that. And our architect identified this as a no additional cost. He created this image here of the Waco grass houses, and this will be installed during the end of phase 3, which is we anticipate June and July. And again, that'll be above the baggage carousel. And then we also have some, on the boarding bridges, we have some marketing space that we've installed to recognize and kind of the city-owned attractions that the city has. And so it's added a nice little element there. We have the QR code there for the Waco app, and it works, and it's a nice little, I guess, addition to our space there as well. So for the future, we'll continue to work with communications in our marketing department to communicate, these exciting updates to the community using the following methods: internal, external signage, PSAs. We're looking at doing some of those as well. Videos highlighting the progress on the city's website. So we're working with that team to capture some of the installation and construction of those pieces of the project. Schedule posts and videos on the city's social media channels. Do a press release for any major updates. And then we'll also notify airport users and businesses of changes that are going to affect the way that they use the airport. And one of the big things that we do, we host tours and open houses to engage our local community. That doesn't, it's, you know, we do elementary school to high school to college, all the way to business organizations within our community. And so we look to work that into our daily activities as well. And then we do plan on coming back in midsummer with a follow-up update of our project. Any questions?
I'll just jump in. Oh, well, great presentation.
Holmes here?
Holmes here, over here. How well, great presentation, as usual. I love what you're doing out there and managing this project. And I want to jump to, most of this is federally funded too. I mean, right, Bradley, the majority of it is, and you're being very responsible with those, the federal funds and some of the funds that the city's putting into it too. And this looks great, and just the progress is exciting. And for those of us that travel quite a bit, I mean, your first impression when you get off the airplane at these regional kind of airports is some are don't look that good. They don't look quite as bad as that first picture that you showed there. LaGuardia maybe, but I think the public art element, the freshness this has, the place definition, the branding that we're doing here, really look really great. And it looks like we had a pretty tight schedule, or it's going to happen here pretty quickly. I like the element that I hadn't seen before of the Huaco tribal millwork. It seems to me that that's the name of our city, and we don't really celebrate it that much. I think there's a monument down in not correctly named Indian Springs Park, but there's a monument there, I think, and that's kind of it. I guess maybe I'm not seeing everything, but I like the fact that we're celebrating the Huaco tribal elements to our city's history there.
Yes.
So kudos to you on that. Great management of the project. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I want to say, I'm going to jump in the middle here, before 3 and 4 and Mayor Pro Tem. I'm excited about your project. We've come a long way at the airport from when I first started flying, and now I look at it and I'm so proud of it. I'm proud that you put in the Waco Indian history of the city of Waco. That's beautiful. I really like that. I like the diverse panels that you had up there for the different things to go and do and see here in the city of Waco. I think that's great. That tells folks, hey, this is what we have, and you can come on out and look at it. I like this whole thing, Joel. I congratulate you and really like what you're doing. I'm excited about my tour. The previous tour I had was canceled because I came down with COVID, so I wasn't able to go. So I'm excited about going Monday to tour the facility. I know it's going to be great, and I know I'm not going to be disappointed. So thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel, for the presentation. So it is coming along right nicely, and I'm excited about the direction that we're going and the inclusiveness of our creative community and the dedication to encouraging more folks to fly Waco. There was a little nod to the floor when you were showing the picture of Byron's flight path art piece, but the floor, which is already actually in, is amazing because it's the longitude and latitude points from Waco where we go, and I think that's pretty cool, and it's something that brings it all in, just not even from eye level, but from floor to ceiling, an opportunity to tell our story. Thank you for the jet bridge advertising. I mean, you know, I don't know, maybe I said it once or twice that would be a great idea, and ooh, I was right. But it's awesome and it looks cool and I love it. I mean, it's the first impression. I'm on a plane, I'm coming from who knows where. I get off the jet bridge. Well, look at Waco. That's what people say, and that's what people experience. Or if they're coming back and leaving to go wherever, oh yeah, I experienced this, I got to do this. It puts it in their mind again before they get to their home destination once leaving our city. That's how we continue to build our brand. I have a question about you showed 2 images about it was a glass etched one and then the welcome wall? Is it either or if then, or what are we talking about?
It's going to have that translucent look to it. So it's not going to be etched in the glass. We anticipate it'll be a wrap that is going to be installed over over glass that's going to be installed in that area.
Okay.
And it's going to be up to a graphic designer that's going to be on this next round of call.
Okay.
to-
And
to-
so,
to
but that
come up
hasn't
with
been decided. Those were just concepts, yeah?
Yes,
Awesome.
ma'am.
And then the last question and statement, the collective placemaking is our priority, and I thank you for being true to that and getting people to experience what Waco really is. In that vein, and you're talking about doing open houses and tours, don't forget our people that are locally in the travel industry. And I'm sure we haven't, but I mean, when's the last time you had a boatload of travel agents? You know,
Yep.
out there, because they're gonna be selling people to Waco or, you know, from Waco. Hey, have y'all considered flying out of Waco? Because it'll still be more cost effective, because, you know, we see the differences in flying out of Dallas and Austin by virtue of gas, by virtue of pricing. So I would not forget those travel agents, because they're bringing folks in and out of the community. So when you get to doing the open houses, when we are extra pretty,
Okay.
don't forget them. Thank you.
Thank you.
I echo what everybody's saying about how beautiful it is and that it's going to contribute greatly to the experience of flying Waco. Could you take a minute and comment on what the ridership looks like and maybe the number of flights and where that's headed? I know it's got to be on the way up since 2020.
I can briefly add, I mean, just our current status of where we are. You know, we currently have 3 flights a day. Our ridership had been pretty stable. We haven't gotten back to pre-COVID numbers, but I think that, you know, with our travel being with the state of a lot of conditions, I think it's not relevant, or it's not isolated just to Waco. So I think that that's one of the things that we do keep an eye on, and I believe I will provide information on a weekly basis to City Council on that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for this report. I share the enthusiasm for our airport's future, and these renderings and the progress are really exciting. So thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
We are,
Mayor and council, I'm going to call a little audible, if that's all right.
please do.
Going to reorganize the work sessions for a moment and invite our esteemed police chief
All right.
up. Yeah, so our next presentation is going to be work session 115. We will get to the other, Clint, you're not off the hook. But I'm going to have Chief come up, and then we'll do the water presentation. So our next work session will be a discussion of police department operations, including crime stats, strategies and updates, and of course, we've got our Chief Cheryl Victorian up here at the table, and I'm excited for you to hear how 2022 ended. Much more excited than how it started, 2022. And she'll be speaking from a statistical standpoint, but also giving an overview of additional strategies to continue the positive momentum regarding public safety here in Waco. Chief?
Thank you, sir. Be ye also always ready. Wait, what is it? Be ye
Also
ready. Okay. All right. Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, our distinguished council, City Manager Ford, our other city staff, and guests. So today, for the next several minutes, I'd like to share an overview of our 2022 year-end crime statistics, our violent crime strategic response implementation plan, and some exciting new initiatives that we're working on with the police department. So let's start with our overall crime trends. First, we will begin with the end of 2022. I'm extremely pleased to report that in 2022, we experienced an 8% decrease in violent crime, a 6% decrease in nonviolent crime, and an overall decrease of 7% in overall crime. This after beginning the year with very concerning violent crime trends. But thanks to the hard work and dedication of our officers, our law enforcement partners, members of our judicial system, and our community, we were able to reverse what could have been a devastating year in murders and other violent crime. So the most concerning crime stat, of course, is homicides. In 2022, we ended the year with 15 murders and 13 homicide investigations. Again, at the beginning of the year, with astonishing comparisons compared to 2021 after the first 5 months. If you guys remember, in May of 2022, we had 14 murders in comparison to 8 the year before. We were fortunate enough to go 7 months without one murder from late May until December. 2 of the investigations, I don't want you to be confused. So there were 15 actual murders, people who lost their lives, and 13 actual investigations because in 2 of those incidents, 2 people lost their lives, okay? We currently have 3 ongoing investigations and have made arrests in 10 of the 13 investigations for a clearance rate of 77%, which is above the current national average of 61%. I'm happy to report that year to date, we have not had any murders in comparison to 5 that we have had at the same time this time last year. So we're definitely trending in the right direction. The next line graph depicts the homicide trend over the past 5 years, showing the highest number of deaths at 17 in 2020 and declining by 1 victim each year since 2020, again, ending the year 2022 with 15 persons who tragically lost their lives. Now, while we hope that no one would lose their lives at the hands of another, keep in mind that the overwhelming majority of our murder investigations are motivated by interpersonal conflict, such as domestic violence, or gang activity, illegal drugs, or other high-risk lifestyles. Our next graph shows the 5-year violent crime trend. As you can see, in 2022, violent crime dropped significantly by 221 incidents in comparison to last year, and was the year with the lowest number of incidents in the 5-year period. Now, this graph depicts the 5-year nonviolent crime trends. Again, in 2022, nonviolent crimes dropped significantly by 464 incidents in comparison to last year, and was the second lowest in the 5-year period. This table of our monthly and yearly comparison crime statistics can be found on our website, and it's updated monthly between the 15th and the 20th. It lists each category of violent and nonviolent crime and shows comparison of the previous year by month and year-to-date comparisons of the previous year. As you can see, the only increase in crime was theft fraud at 4%. All other crime categories were down from as low as 6% to as low as 33%. As a city, we should be incredibly proud of the work we're doing, the partnerships, the prevention and intervention, and yes, the significant arrest of those individuals who try to wreak havoc on our communities by victimizing others. So I believe that our holistic response to the violent crime trends we were experiencing was essential to the reduction of our overall crime. The incredible police work of our officers, combined with the hard work of our law enforcement partners, members of our judicial system, were instrumental in removing violent offenders, guns, and drugs off the streets of Waco. While the absence of crime and not arrests are indicators of success, apprehending and holding accountable those who victimize others is essential to the reduction of criminal activity of those small percentage of people who choose to break the law. As you see, in 2022, we had a total of 4,073 arrests, and in 2021, we had 3,870. Our nonviolent crime arrests were 3,044 in 2020 in comparison to 2,830 in 2021. Our total violent crime arrests in 2022 was 1,028 compared to 1,040 in 2021. This next slide is a summary of our firearms that are lost, stolen, or that we're holding for safekeeping. Please keep in mind, as indicated on the slide, that this figure represents the total number of firearms that were collected as evidence, found as property, those that were held for safekeeping, and or those that were recovered stolen. In 2021, we had a total of 385 firearms that were reported lost or stolen, and we recovered 497 as evidence, found property, safekeeping, or recovered stolen. In 2022, we had 308 firearms reported lost or stolen and recovered a total of 556 as evidence, found property, held for safekeeping, or recovered stolen. So while the number of guns recovered increased, the number of guns reported lost or stolen decreased, which indicates to me that while our citizens are practicing responsible gun ownership, our officers are still removing more guns in comparison to years before off the streets. So the following slide are photos of evidence recovered as a result of investigations led by our Texas Anti-Gang Office, which includes the work of our drug enforcement, gang, and street crime units, along with other law enforcement partners assigned to TAG. We had a total number of 388 non-gang felony arrests, a total of 49 felony gang arrests, a total of 364 charges that were filed, and a total of 19 gang members arrested for misdemeanors. We also recovered 6 assault rifles, 94 handguns, and 4 shotguns this year. This is only a portion of the arrests made and evidence recovered this year, as our patrol officers were also very influential in being proactive in removing violent offenders and guns off our streets. It was the combination of these arrests, our follow-up investigations by our detectives, witness cooperation, appropriate bonds set for violent offenders, and evidence recovery that played an important role in reducing crime. In addition to apprehension and evidence recovery, I believe that our prevention and intervention responses were also instrumental. I expect our relational policing principles to be reflected in all of our interactions in each one of our commands: patrol, investigations, and support. But primarily, we ensure that we are increasing positive interactions with the community by being proactive in conducting trainings, in hosting, attending, and being involved in community events. This is one of the many functions of our Community Services Division. The newest unit to our Community Service Division, as you know, is our Neighborhood Engagement Team, which has been established for 1 year this month and has accomplished a lot. The NET unit, along with our Community Outreach and SAFE units, have been essential in crime prevention and crime intervention. Our team has attended 81 neighborhood association meetings. We attended 54 community meetings, including meetings with our school leaders, faith leaders, LGBTQIA+ community, Central Texas African American and Hispanic Chambers communities, commerce, and more. We coordinated and participated in over 125 events, including our own Community Opportunity Event, National Faith in Blue Weekend events, our Crime Prevention Summit, National Night Out, Back to School Bash, Summer Safe Start, Project Safe Start, our Junior Police Academies, Explorers, Red Ribbon Week. Other events include our Coffee with the Cops, our tutoring and mentoring at public libraries and community centers, community block parties, community softball game with Eastern Little League, our Special Olympics events, and others. We also conducted over 25 citizens' response to active shooter training classes for the public. Our SAFE unit, which is our Support Abatement Forfeiture Enforcement unit, is a state trainer for our crime-free multi-housing and crime-free motel programs. As you likely know, we have over 6,500 rental units in the city of Waco and 76 apartment communities. Last year alone, we saw a reduction of 28% in calls for service to those that participate in this program, as well as a 59% reduction of arrests at these locations. Some of the additional events that we have is our newly developed UNIDOS program. UNIDOS is a Hispanic outreach program designed to provide assistance and information to our Spanish-speaking community with a focus on parents and children. We started to have these meetings quarterly, and it's led by our officer, Anita Gomez, who is assigned to our neighborhood engagement team, and she is supported by Officer Sophie Martinez. Our second 12-week Citizens Police Academy of the year begins in August. Registration began in late spring. We're in one right now. We're having our second annual Women in Policing Summit on March the 30th. Women in Public Safety Summit, because we're including our firefighters and our other public safety partners on March the 30th. And we're also excited to be reactivating our Police Activities League, our PALS program, later this month. We're also proud to announce the permanent addition of our Social Resource Program Coordinator, Ms. D'Angela Bynum. Ms. Bynum's role has played a big part, as a part of a pilot program in partnership with Waco Connect in August of 2021. Her contributions to our team have made such a difference in managing resources and time spent on handling those calls involving individuals with mental crisis. Her role extends beyond the crisis, and she spends countless hours following up with consumers in an effort to reduce the number of contacts that they have with the police. As our social resource program supervisor, she'll continue to coordinate services between the Waco Police Department, the community, and other social resource entities to allow access to social service resources and assist community members in addressing critical mental and behavioral health concerns. A few of the new initiatives that we have starting, we're excited to report a new opportunity to partner with the Heart of Texas Behavioral Network to provide licensed mental health professionals in our dispatch center to divert nonviolent mental health calls from police response through a PSAP grant. And PSAP means Public Safety Answering Points, which are responsible for receiving 911 calls and processing those calls according to a specific operating policy. Our anticipated start date for that program is going to be the fall or September 2023. In April of last year, I had the opportunity to participate in the Leadership for a Network World Program at Harvard University, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance was present. And while there, they called in Denver to do one of the presentations to talk about their mental health programs. And the BJA stood up after that and said that if you're interested in, doing site visits to these locations, then just let us know. We'll sponsor it. So of course I raised my hand. And in August of 2022, myself, along with the CEO of Behavioral Health Network, Daniel Thompson, attended Denver site. We attended the Denver site visit along with other chiefs and mental health service providers. And what we saw, we were very impressed with what we saw, and we knew that we could implement some of these programs in Waco. So what we decided to do was do our own site visit and take our own team. And last week, we did a second site visit with Denver, and we took those key individuals on our team who could help us to identify any gaps and come up with ideas and funding to see which programs would work best in Waco. So we are currently working on that. Our team had the opportunity to see the support team assisted response van, which includes an emergency medical technician and behavioral health clinician that engages with individuals experiencing distress related to mental health, poverty, homelessness, and substance abuse. The STAR is what it's called. It responds to those low-risk calls where individuals are not in imminent risk, and it's dispatched through their 911 center. So again, it diverts the calls so that police don't have to respond, but they will respond. Another program, Commander Jared Wallace has been asked to participate in the Faith in Blue Community Outreach Board. It's the inaugural year of the Law Enforcement Community Agency Network that's sponsored through the Faith in Blue Community Outreach. This is just a tremendous opportunity for us to share our success stories and learn from and with other law enforcement agencies leading the way in community engagement. In 2023, they'll be launching this cohort of 20 members. I just want you to know that there are over 18,000 police departments across this country, and Waco PD is the one of 20 representing on this cohort. We have also been asked, Sergeant Melissa Thompson has been asked to sit on the Executive Council of the Law Enforcement Agency, Law Enforcement Against Drug and Violence Crime Program. As a member of the council, she'll provide input, advice, and assistance to the staff and board of directors, and assist in providing education in inner city schools and law enforcement agencies with a more diverse composition. And we will be starting a lead program in a couple of our schools I'm not sure if she starts in the spring or the fall, but we will be starting this program. And, we are hiring. 30-second video highlighting our competitive incentives. Thanks to our city manager, our council, this has been working great for us. right, that's the end of the video, but please help us spread the word and we're looking for just those individuals that are public safety minded, that love the community, that are passionate, that are engaged, just to be a part of our team. So please share the message. Right now we have 92 preliminary applications for a test date on March the 4th for our civil service exam, and hopefully we'll get a lot of those packets back to move through the process. All right, so we've increased our recruiting efforts at events. We've sponsored and attended, and we set up booths at cultural events to attract more diversity. We have advertisement in USA Today on our Waco buses, and we even have a billboard. Waco PD is proud to participate in our 30 by 30 initiative, which aims to increase the number of representation of women in policing from 12% to 30% by 2030. We currently have 16% representation, so we're well on our way. We are at 268 sworn personnel, and with the addition of the 24 officers you've given us, we should be at 291. So we are hiring, and we want to fill all of those positions. I also want to give a shout out to our dispatch unit. Let me start by saying that we have an authorized strength in our dispatch of 36 full-time employees and 4 part-time employees. However, our actual strength is 21 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. The ones that we have are very dedicated and loyal and are putting in a lot of hours. It's a very stressful job, and it's hard to find good candidates, but we want you guys to know that we answer roughly 3 times more calls than we dispatch. These numbers of all calls, and all of these numbers, no, these numbers include, all calls and calls for service to 8 law enforcement and public safety agencies that we dispatch for. In 2022, we dispatched 2.57 as many calls as we answered 2.57 as many calls as we actually responded to. We're looking for some mature, patient, thoughtful, efficient men and women who are comfortable operating in a high-paced, high-stressed environment, but it's a rewarding space. So please spread the word for that as well. One thing that I would like to bring to your attention on the heels of that is our priority 1 hold and response times. While over the past several months, these combined times have been decreasing, waiting for the police to respond to emergencies for just over 10 minutes can seem like an eternity. While this is not the case for all calls, it is concerning that this is average and that some hold times and response times may take longer. Several contributing factors include the amount of time it takes to answer the call when we're short-staffed in dispatch, the amount of time that it takes for the initial caller to provide the pertinent information requested, and then entering that information in CAD or computer-aided dispatch, and then the amount of time the call may be held in queue until an officer is available, and our dispatch is able to determine what officer, if any, can be preempted from a call. And finally, the amount of time it takes for the officer to arrive to that individual call safely.
So Chief, just a note on that, in blue, let's say that 3.61 in 2022, that represents essentially the average duration in minutes of a call before it sends an officer to respond. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for clearing that up. The numbers in blue are actually our hold times that it's still in dispatch, and once it's dispatched, the color in orange represents the time it takes for our officers to get to that call.
From the moment they get it,
Yes.
it takes an average of 7.3 minutes to then get to the scene, essentially. Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Appreciate that.
Ideally, I'd like to.
Chief,
Yes, I'm
remind us
sorry.
how
I'm
many,
sorry.
units are on duty during a shift? How many actual people are available to respond to calls?
Yes, so on day shift, and we have a minimum staffing again of 15.
Sure.
18 on our good days. And then in evening shift and night shift are the same with the overlap of 9 to 1, 9 p.m. to 1.
Those where they're double lapped. But these are 15 to 18 at best officers for 100 square miles in the city of Waco.
Exactly, except between the hours of 9 and 1.
Okay.
Yes. Ideally, I'd like to eliminate some of these barriers to reduce the total response times to as low as we could possibly get them, accounting from the time needed to take the call, dispatch the call, and an officer's ability to arrive safely. I found a 2019 study and that listed the top 10 major city police departments and their average response times, and five of those Texas law enforcement agencies were on that list. Amongst the cities in Texas, with Houston being one of the lowest at 5.51, and Fort Worth being one of the highest in that top 10 at 9.5. So imagine of the major cities, 10 or more, much higher than 9.5 million minutes. But we'll work with our City Manager Ford, and our City Manager's office to determine the needs of our agencies and ways to continue to reduce these numbers. All right, please follow us on social media, follow and share. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. We have our very own weekly podcast hosted by our PIO, Sierra Shipley, who brings you up close and personal to our officers, shares crime prevention tips and strategies, and talk about what's going on with our community partners, and she also shares our crime statistics. And finally, I'd just like to leave you by repeating that the safety of our city is dependent on the partnerships between our police department and the residents of our city, and that's how we fight crime. Public safety is all of our responsibility. Questions?
Chief, thank you for this presentation. I'm impressed by your issues here, but I want to thank your Assistant City Manager, Ryan Holt, and two of your police officers, Gomez and Long, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
We had a problem in one of my neighborhoods, and I keep calling him Chief, but he's not Chief. Holt, Ryan, brought these officers to the resident that is having problems in his neighborhood. And that's when I heard about the neighborhood program and the UNIDOS program as well, both of which I was so glad to have those as a resource for our neighborhood residents. But they did stress, join your neighborhood association, it helps. But I wanted to publicly thank Ryan and the police officers, Gomez and Long, for coming and talking to our resident about the problems that he's having in his neighborhood. And the quick response I got from your officers and city managers, Assistant City Manager Holt, I thank you for that, thank the officers for that, and it made our constituents feel so much safer in what they told him to do and to help. It takes not just the police department, as you stated, it takes the residents as well to be able to help and report these incidences. I know some of them in that area don't feel like they can call in. They feel like lost, I guess is the word, I'm not sure. But I think today reassured some folks about our police officers' intent to serve and protect our citizens of Waco. And for that, I thank all our officers, and I want to thank Ryan, I want to call him Chief, for setting that up for me and for helping me with the constituent that is having a lot of problems. So I wanted to publicly thank. And like I said, I found out about UNIDOS and the neighborhood program that Officer Gomez is over. So thank you for that.
Since we're on this end, I'll just go and we'll work it out. Thank you, Chief Victorian, for this report and this update, along with our racial profiling report, our annual racial profiling report that we do every year. If you have not, those who are watching and not here, if you have not had the opportunity to see it, you understand that the city of Waco is doing very well as far as in our annual report of how we do the policing work that we do. And I mentioned earlier that the only difference that I'd like to see in that report is a report over annual time, if there'd been any percentage changes over year to year. So I think that would be some information maybe we could ask the good doctor to provide for us.
Ryan shared that with me today, and I reached out to him today, and he said, "You bet." So
Thank you.
I'll ask for, yes, I'll be specific with what we asked for.
A couple of things I just wanted to give congratulations and kudos to our police department and you as far as the work with our behavioral health team and the incorporation of that, because I think it's the Peace Garden that y'all have.
Peace Garden, have you been over?
I have.
Yes.
It's amazing. And I think that I have no idea, would never have any idea what it is like to be a police officer. But I think if there's a wholesome space to be in as you enter in or leave out of your building, the police department and the police tower, that could bring you some calm. I think that those are the things that help our culture be what it is. Over the course of time, we have seen that it's not any particular one group of people, but if we have a culture that is in trauma, then we are all in trauma. So any efforts that are done to protect our officers, protect our employees that are in PD, to help bring them some mental safe space and stability, I applaud that in every effort and look forward to how you grow and develop your officers in that way. NAACP hosted Chat with the Chiefs, and it was bomb. It was one of the best meetings that we've had. We had all of the local chiefs of police, ISD polices, our city, sister city chiefs, and that came, and it was a great event. We could have been there several hours, but the library kicked us out. No shade over there, Essie.
Just following the proper rules
Just
and
follow the
procedures.
protocol. But it was something that I think everybody got something out of, from our young NAACP members, our children NAACP members, to our senior NAACP members, and all those who were watching Facebook Live. I got so many positive responses just to be able to hear how you all interact and engage in the culture of what's going on in policing community. And that's helpful to the layperson, because if we're eating all we see and hear on TV, that is not a full story. And so, if you want to build a narrative, you have to say a narrative. So I appreciate that from coming out to you. And I will conclude with, I think that we are on the right path. I think the trajectory that we have been building on from the time when I know when Ryan was in leadership at that time, from the resurgence of our neighborhood engagement team to the development and hiring of our new chief of police to where we are now with our behavioral health networks and the partnerships that we do there, we are absolutely on the right track to building trust again, to involvement again, and for everybody understanding that it is all of our responsibilities to see to the safety of Waco. So we thank you for that.
I'm going to beat Jim.
Go ahead.
Everybody wants to be Jim.
Chief, I just want to say that in my view, these are stellar results. I mean, it's just amazing to me what improvements have been made. And I think that it's incumbent on the council and you and the rest of your folks to make sure we're beating that drum and getting the word out. I know we think everybody has the opportunity to hear this by watching the TV, but I'm sorry, everybody doesn't watch. So we need to look for ever-increasing opportunities to tell this story, because it's a great story. And I thank you and your people for that work.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Horner on that. The great job and great presentation, Chief Victorian. Yeah, the crime is down 7%. I mean, that is amazing. We're a growing city, and there's a lot going on, pandemic, a lot of construction going on. It's a kind of all the elements of there being perhaps more crime, but we're actually seeing it going down. That's a tribute to you and the entire police force. And maybe Wacoans are behaving themselves better. I don't know, since you're in charge. That might be part of it too. But
Thank
no,
you.
I don't want to make light of this because it's a very high stress job that you guys have. And my hat is off to you, Chief, the entire Waco PD, and the job you've done. And really sending the message that Waco is a safe city. That's really what we're trying to say. Waco is a safe city and it's a great city. And you're making that happen. To echo some of the things that Councilmember Bearfield talked about, I like the fact that you're talking the talk, but you're walking the walk, and your police force is walking the walk. We talk about prevention and intervention, and you're showing us all the different ways that you're making that happen. You talk about relational policing, and I got to say, you're present at so many functions, and every function I go to, you or one of your policemen is at, and I like the visibility that you're creating in that. I think it really helps show that that the police force is here to help and here to make you safe. And the part that also Andrew talked about is you kind of went out, and we're very proactive about the behavioral health aspect, and where you kind of went on your own up to Denver and tried to figure out what they were doing and how to make that relationship work better between policing and behavioral health, which I think is the direction as we see more behavioral health issues. We need to figure out how to make that mesh perfectly or as well as possible, where police can stabilize the situation and then hand that off to a behavioral health specialist and not tie up the law enforcement's time and have it better addressed with another specialist. So I see that, and you're taking the lead on that, and I appreciate it. I personally believe in a strong police force that's properly trained, properly equipped, and properly staffed. I like the little the promotion thing that you have there. Hopefully it's working. We need to, how many more? 10, 15 more?
Sorry?
How many are we short right now?
24, 26.
So let's, we need some more law enforcement here. Anyway, great job, great presentation, good numbers, everything was good. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Just to conclude, I share the encouraging sentiments spoken here by my council and my fellow council members, and want to continue to encourage you in all this good work. I'd love to see the good work in apprehension and the partnerships and the trust being built with prevention and intervention in your community engagement. That's just so encouraging to see, along with the actual crime numbers going down. And as a former prosecutor myself and board member of the local mental health authority behavioral health network, just seeing what you're doing to help divert folks into treatment that don't need criminal law apprehension and adjudication is very important. It means a lot to the city. It means a lot to the county as well, as often county sheriff's departments become the largest mental health provider in that jurisdiction by default. So we're grateful for all the good work you're doing, and just keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Council, our next work session, we're going to take work session 116. Paul, you were right. Come on down. He got a little nervous, it looked like.
Oh, y'all just going all
And it's a discussion of our water conservation and drought contingency plan, particularly stage 3, which is defined as a severe water shortage. Assistant City Manager Paul Kane, as well as our Director of Water Utilities Services, Lisa Tyre, are here to speak about the continuing drought and our long-range water planning solutions. I've scheduled this presentation to raise awareness of what we feel like is a serious situation that hopefully people will tune into and pay attention to. Water in years past in Waco, but also around the country, has been viewed as a commodity or as a revenue stream. And we're trying to make the transition in our future decisions and planning to view it as a resource that requires management and investment to ensure we stay ahead of water scarcity. And it's only through those methods that we can ensure a growing and vibrant region. So I look forward to hearing from Lisa and Paul.
Great. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, Mayor and Council. It's good to be with you this afternoon. Lisa Tyre and I will be tag teaming this presentation in WWE style, so.
Chairs, tables? No? Okay.
Yeah, no chair throwing. I think it's important to talk about why this presentation is needed. And, the purpose, as Bradley said, is to raise awareness of a challenging future, and it's really challenging on two different fronts. Most immediately, without significant rainfall over the next few months, we will be approaching a water emergency in Waco for the first time. So that's certainly an issue that we want to talk to you about today, and we'll get to that with some data here in a minute. Our lake levels are historically low, and we're currently in stage 2, as Bradley mentioned. We'll be transitioning to stage 3 and even stage 4, which is the highest level this year without significant rainfall. We'll get some details of that here in a minute. Also want to talk about conservation, certainly, and the restrictions that we have are intended to conserve water, but conservation is not our only, not the way out of this in the long term. We want to talk to you today about some short and long-term strategies and the need to champion those strategies as we move forward and look at ways to implement those strategies as well. And then last, I want to talk a little bit about the community impacts, and there'll be significant, really either way we go. If we don't get rainfall, there'll be significant impacts economically, environmentally, financially, and even aesthetically in the community. And if we do get rain, there's still going to be impacts for us going forward because we need to identify ways to try to avert this in the future, looking for new supplies, and new supplies cost money. And so we'll be talking about that going forward. So at this point, I will turn it over to Lisa to talk a little bit about some history in the lake as it exists today.
Good afternoon. So everybody always thinks of Lake Waco as being our water supply, like it's been here forever, but that's not how it started out. Originally, Waco was relying on wells and the Brazos River, but in 1925, Waco had exhausted their wells and had pumped the Brazos River dry. Quite a picture when you think about that. So in 1929, bonds were authorized to construct the first Lake Waco. And so in 1930, that first Lake Waco dam was constructed. The only problem was they built a very shallow lake. So by the time you got to the 50s, we were in a 7-year drought. And in 1950, due to the drought conditions, the city begins planning for water. In 1956, city officials lobby for the construction of a new dam. And then the dam is built, the current dam we have, that was in 1964. But 15 short years later, we are already in a planning cycle again. In 1979, Waco City Council authorizes a study for raising Lake Waco. In 1988, Waco City Council approves the Lake Waco Rise project, and we impounded that water, that 7 feet of water, in 2003. The reason why for this slide to me and what it really represents is every one of those bolded items with a star is where somebody took action that made it to where Waco's future right now, the economic, I don't know, it's been a party in some ways. We've had so much economic growth, but all of that has been possible because of all this past planning that was done. And so we always think of this, we're in a drought right now, but this is a picture of the drought from 1956. You can see the old twin bridges in the background, and they called this a mud pit. That despite rationing, there were days when water would not reach everyone's taps. So you can see we've been in worse situations. And this is looking at Google Earth, who provides these wonderful satellite pictures. But you can see that Lake Waco in May of 2021, you can see how green it was. You can see Lake Waco wetlands over there on the left side of that top slide, that it was pretty lush looking. You can see that there was a lot of water, but 15 months later, in August of 2022, Lake Waco wetlands looks pretty barren, and the Brazos River is not actually inflowing into Lake Waco, and that the water has receded so much around Flat Rock Boat Ramp that it is basically kind of created its own mini lake up there. And that just becomes important because we have a drone video from that Flat Rock boat ramp. And so you can kind of see what it looks like as of last week. And so a good portion of what you're seeing there should be underwater. This is that mini lake that I've talked about that was created. And as it keeps going, we're going to eventually see where the Brazos River is going to come in. The North Bosque River comes in. And it's that little curve right there. You can see where it breached the mini lake wall a little bit with the recent rains. And up until those recent rains, this river was not reaching Lake Waco, but it does appear that it has crusted over its sandbar and has been able to reach. But pretty much everything you're seeing in that picture right there should all be underwater right now. And as we continue on, you'll see that the shoreline becomes wider and wider and wider, and you can see just how much the lake has receded overall. It's pretty disturbing.
Thank you, Lisa. I want to talk to you a little bit about the lake levels themselves and give you some perspective that I hope will be helpful to give you some sense of where we are today. With the current levels at 450.97 mean sea level, we're about 11.23 feet low or below full. And this chart shows you 43 years of history of conservation storage, and that's the volume of water stored between the inactive pool elevation and the flood control stage, and that's the water that's available for municipal uses. Note there are 3 times, and I'll try to point them out here, at this 100,000 acre feet level. You see dipped below that there, close to it here, and then today in 2023, close to it again. So the most recent is in January 31st to February 1st of this year, when lake levels were at 104,000 acre feet. And then you go to February of 2000 at 104, and then in 1984 it actually got down below 100, down to 86,000 acre feet. But this shows, you'll see here, this is the old lake, if you want to call it that, and then this is the pool rise here. So when the total capacity increased. So you'll see, I think this is really telling. When you look at the 40-year history, even before the pool rise, we have only been at this point 3 times in that period of time. So fairly significant. We're going to take a closer look at this on some of the next slides, but that pool rise that we talked about, that increased the conservation storage by nearly 37,000 acre feet, or about 11.9 billion gallons of water. And as Lisa talked earlier, that really shows a lot of foresight and commitment from previous councils and staff to look at this pool rise. And you can see and imagine in your mind, had this not been done, where some of these lower points would be without that additional water. So when we talk about the lake, we often talk about it as percent full. And the average from 2003, the pool rise, until 2022, the lake was usually around 91.57% full. A year ago, we were at 84%, and then today at 57.47% full, and it's a fairly dramatic change, certainly. The chart at right kind of shows the fluctuations since the impoundment. We're currently in a 524-day slide or decline, and on 450 of those 524 days, we lost water in the lake. Since 2003, the lake's been below 60% full on 200 days. So there's been 200 days total below the 60%. You can kind of see those here and here. So 200 days total below 60% full. 135 of those days have been 22 and 23. 2022 saw more days below 60% full, 88 days, than the previous 20 years combined. So that gives you some sense of where we are today. And again, on January 31st to February 1st of this year, the lake was at its lowest percent full level, 55%, since the 2003 impoundment. This chart is a little more details of the previous slide. The chart shows the years and days in each year when the lake was below 60% full. Back in 06 and 07, you see the days there. That's about 64 consecutive days. And then you look at where we are today, we are at about 138 days and counting of consecutive days below 60% full. So twice as much as we've ever been since the pool rise in terms of consecutive days below 60%. And interestingly, when you look at the data, this period of time, as you can kind of infer from the chart, it covers about the same period from October to February during both, I guess you'd say, terms. So late fall of '06, early winter of '07, late fall of '22, early winter of '23. This slide, I believe, is really impactful. It shows the actual lake level July of 2021 through January of '23 versus the historic lake levels. And as you see here, the historic lake levels are shown in this brown rust-colored line here. And in the blue line, you see where we were. And again, this is, we phrase it as a water surplus. Essentially, you're above the historic levels in the lake. And then after that, and from that point forward, you see where the actual lake levels have gone versus historic lake levels. And so you'll see, obviously, a dramatic deficit begins appearing. And then in the summer months, the slope of the line steepens, as you might imagine. And certainly use is a part of that, but evaporation is a part of that as well. In certain days where the heat's high, we actually lose more water from evaporation than we consume. So fairly dramatic. And I think this slide, again, is really impactful because it shows that how much deficit that we are compared to historic levels in the lake.
Paul, when you say historical lake levels, what you're talking about is the average annual cycle historically of the lake level.
Yes, sir, that's right. And it just shows how the lake fluctuates and it builds back up. Springtime typically is when we get the majority of the rains and it falls back down. So it just shows you kind of the cycle over time during these months. So one question we often get, and you may get, is how much water do we have? Well, we have 35.5 billion gallons of water today estimated, and that sounds like a lot of water until you realize that we use about 11 billion gallons a year. And again, as I talked about with evaporation, that can be even more than we actually consume. So we're looking at 11 to 16 billion gallons annually of evaporation loss. So with those combined today, with the water that's in the lake, we have less than 2 years of water supply stored in Lake Waco. So if we don't get more water, more rain, then that certainly spells concern for all of us in terms of water usage and water availability going forward. So why is this happening? Rainfall, essentially, right? And we can't blame it on the rain and the lack of it going forward. I figured I'd get something from Mayor Pro Tem Borderud on that, but never mind. All right.
Trying to remain pretty, sober-minded, but that was a pretty solid
Thanks, sir.
reference
Appreciate
there.
that. Thank you. Let's talk about the drought in the area. This is from the federal government's drought monitor, and it points out a couple of things I think I'll just illustrate here with the mouse. So here's Waco, and it shows severe drought here, which is about a third of McLennan County, and extreme drought, and then severe drought in brown. The 600 or 1,600 square miles drainage basin for Lake Waco is right here. So certainly, as we look at what's happening to Lake Waco, the drought and where the drought is tells us a lot about our lake and where we are today.
Because that drainage basin is also, there's a significant overlap with the Bosque River watershed. Is that correct? And so,
yes.
Because that area is so dry, we're not getting the normal flows into the lake that we typically get from the Bosque River and its tributaries.
Absolutely, and we'll show that, some data on that in a couple of slides here.
Okay.
Looking at rainfall, since 1980, the average rainfall in Waco is 34.6 inches. 2022's total was the second lowest in 42 years, behind only 1999. In 2022 across Waco, if you think about what that 13 inches of rainfall means, and not all water that falls in Waco goes to the lake, part of it goes to the Brazos, as we all know, but that 13, nearly 14 inches of rainfall, that's 24.8 billion gallons of water. and equal to about 76,000 acre feet of water. So when we talk about how much we were below average, that's how much water we're talking about in those 13 inches. So significant amount of water that the area did not receive in 2022. So it's not only the total rainfall, it's when it occurs. And certainly when we talk about water revenues, Lisa constantly talks about, that in terms of when we sell water and what that means for us in terms of revenue. It also means a lot for consumption and availability in the lake. And this chart shows a comparison between the average for the 42 years, and that's shown in these columns here, seasonally, so essentially quarterly throughout the year, what the average rainfall is. And then 2022 is shown in the light bars and then the deficits below. So as you look at wintertime, that winter quarter, call it January to March, where we were, so you're going into the growing season in the hole. April and June are typically fairly wet, same thing there. And so you're compounding the problem as you go through the year in terms of when the rainfall is occurring. If the rainfall occurs late March, early April, you tend to have longer periods of less consumption based on the rainfall that was received. So this kind of shows you it's not only where, but when. And we'll talk a little bit more about the where here, and this gets to your point, Councilmember Bordery. This is the Lake Waco drainage basin and watershed, and it typically has, or not typically, it does. It has 3 different streams into it: the North Bosque, the Hog Creek, and the Middle Bosque. And we're going to talk about each one of those here. But I thought this slide was really interesting. It shows looking at the North Bosque River, that's a point up at Valley Mills, and the monthly average discharge in cubic feet. So this monthly average discharge is shown in the columns here. And then you plot over the top of that 2021 flows here, and notice what happens in August in 2021. Starts falling below average and just tails off even more. And then you put 2022 on top of that, and it really starts at the same place, and then incredibly tails off even more. And the North Bosque, as Lisa was showing you those pictures, that is the North Bosque coming into the lake, and it is the biggest supplier of water into Lake Waco. And it essentially is having little to no flow up to this point. Another slide here talking about where the water falls, and again, this I think is telling. Hog Creek near Crawford. Hog Creek is one of the creeks that, of course, empty into Lake Waco. You look at the average discharge in cubic feet from 80 to 21 here at this line, and then you look at what happened in 2022, and then this is the percent of that average. So you can see that Hog Creek is not even 1% of a typical flow. The Middle Bosque near McGregor, again, the same kind of format of the data. And again, you see where we are with regard to the average, and look from June, July, August, September, October. Almost no flow at all. And the North Bosque, this is just a detailed tabular form of what we saw earlier. But again, look at how we've tailed off May, June, July, August, September, and October of 22. So again, the rainfall, the total rainfall, where the rainfall occurs, and then the seasons that occur all affect consumption and use in the lake. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa, and she's going to talk a little bit about our drought response plan.
So the city's drought response plan is required by the state, and it lays out restrictions to reduce consumption in response to low lake levels and other water emergencies. So our drought response stages, we have 4 of them. We have a mild, which is pretty much voluntary restrictions. You can choose to conserve. We're asking you to look at your water consumption. We have moderate shortage, which is what the stage we're currently in. And we have stage 3, which is severe, and then we have stage 4, which is an emergency. The city manager has a broad range of discretion to put us into any stage at any time, but usually it's based on one of 4 reasons or combination. One could be that we have, a water emergency, and that water emergency might be a plant that has to be taken offline for an extended time period, or a serious water leak on a major line. Another type of reason why we might be in a stage would be because of our inability to recover in our storages. That's what happened in the Winter Storm Uri. We had a bigger demand than what we could get the water, than what we could produce water to get into our water storages. It could be because of the weather forecast. It could be that, they're forecasting that we're not going to have rain for a year, so he may opt to put us in a stage earlier than what we normally would be. But the primary reason that usually we're put into a stage is because of the drastic drop in Lake Waco. And right now we're predicting that we will be in stage 3, which is severe, in April of this year. We are also predicting that we will be in the emergency shortage stage in August of this year. Now, all that is subject to change because we can have better than expected conservation. We could have less evaporation than what we think is going to occur. We could have a lower amount of consumption, or we could get enough rain that would keep us out of that stage 3.
So, Lisa, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Briefly on those predictions or projections? I mean, is that based on certain meteorological trends? Or I realized we're talking in one sense about our rainfall here, but also, as Paul was sharing earlier, there's also a rainfall in the basin that's equally, if not more important to the lake levels. So are these, what's the basis of the projections? It's based on current trends right now, or based on what we're getting from, federal weather sources?
So maybe a combination. In particular, one of the things that we can do, because there's a lot of data on it, is we can look at how much the lake is dropping on a day-by-day basis. And so you can kind of take that number for different times of the year and divide it into how many feet you have before you hit that next stage level. So if right now, if we're at 450 and the lake is dropping by 0.2 of an inch a day, then we can take that and we can divide that 0.2 into how much we think we have left before we hit that next stage, and then count out the days.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what we've been doing. We've been pretty accurate, except for when rain has come, especially when we weren't expecting it, maybe. And so that rain is the number one thing that could keep us out of moving to that next stage. And you're absolutely right. Truthfully, what happens in that watershed is more relevant to Lake Waco than what happens immediately in Waco. So if it rains in that watershed and it rains a lot, that tends to flow down to Lake Waco, and that's what fills the lake, more so than rainfall that occurs in Waco.
And is that watershed, just real quick, is that watershed experiencing in the last several years any more consumption from other communities than it has historically, or is it flowing the way it has flowed, since it's been filling our lake?
Of Texas has been growing, but I don't think there's been anything significant with anyone pulling additional water out of that river. I think it's really just been the lack of rain in that watershed. And because the North Bosque feeds, that's 70% of our water into the lake is from that one river. That's why we focus so heavily on that river.
Okay. Thank you.
So every time we enter another stage of the drought contingency plan, you can imagine it gets harder for everyone. We're getting stricter. And so in stage 2 right now, we're trying to reduce our usage by 5%. We've got our outside watering on 2 days a week, with it prohibited between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Everybody's assigned their days. And then right now we're allowing a variance for 30 days of watering to establish new plants. When we move to stage 3, we're looking for a 15% reduction, which is really significant increase. We're going to 1 day per week of watering. We have added a few more hours that you can water on your day, so you would be prohibited between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m., but on Saturday and Sunday, there would be no watering. And you can see what happens when we move to stage 4. There is no outside watering. Swimming pools, tubs, spas, anything of that nature. Under stage 2, they can still be established, you can still permit them, you can still build them. When we get to stage 3, you can only replenish them with a handheld hose on your day, and that's only for operational purposes. And new permits for those types of items is prohibited. When we get to stage 4, they're totally prohibited. You cannot refill your pool.
I had a quick question on that one.
Yes.
I'll have more comments later on this one. In the materials that were distributed, you had same in that bottom right-hand corner. It's changed. Is it now prohibited?
Yes, sir. That was a draft
Okay.
that we sent out Friday to get something in your hands for you to have a chance to
Yep.
review, but we've
Just want to make sure.
corrected that.
And so a lot of people like to use water to wash down their driveways, their sidewalks, their businesses. So all that washing of impermeable surfaces goes away under stage 3 and stage 4. So those will both be prohibited. Car washes. Car washes in stage 3 will be allowed if 50% of their water is recycled. So they're reusing 50% of the water in that car wash process, or if on a handheld wand, if it uses less than 3 gallons per minute. But when we hit stage 4, it is prohibited. Golf courses, parks, ball fields, in stage 3, they can operate on their day with a controlled irrigation system incorporating evapotranspiration data and setting irrigation run times. And they're still subject to trying to reduce their water usage by that 15%. But when we hit stage 4 again, they're prohibited. There will be no watering.
Does that include Hawaiian Falls and that kind of thing as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the car washes, a quick question on that one. Do many of, we've approved several new car washes coming in, and I've seen a few in operation now, Waco Drive and New Road, and some other places. Do they have the capacity, do many car washing places in the city of Waco have the capacity to do 50% reused water?
Almost all of those that you're talking about where you drive through and they wash, almost all of those, they do that just to control their cost for water, because you can imagine that's one of their biggest uses. So most of them are doing that. Some of them have what they call reverse osmosis systems in them. So that is a real common thing for them to do, to reuse that water.
All right, thanks, Lisa. While restrictions can help extend the life of the water that we have, we do need to pursue some strategies that bring more water into our system. Like the pool rise planning in the 80s and 90s, this effort will require both championing, sorry, it's easy for somebody else to say. Yeah, an advocate. Thanks, Lisa. Tag team. Awesome. And somebody to lead that effort. And as Lisa pointed out, in the history of Waco, that's what's happened. Councils and staff have stepped up and identified the need for us to look at some of those longer-term strategies. And some of those long-term solutions, as well as some of the short ones, aren't cheap. And we'll be talking about that as we go forward. So the drought and lake level have opened our eyes to the need to rethink both short and long-term strategies. In the 2000 era pool rise gave us capacity to weather a long drought to this point, but now we know that more supply is required. Due to efforts to acquire water rights by this city council and previous city councils, we have capacity to bring to bear on this issue in both the short and the long term. And in hindsight, we do need to give more attention to our water planning efforts to ensure that they're comprehensive, practical, realistic, and affordable. And not only our City of Waco water planning, but our participation in regional planning through BRASSG as well. And that's something that we're working with BRASSG on and with BRA on, and making sure that as we look at these regional strategies, that they are practical and realistic. Talking about Waco's water rights, this pie chart shows those water rights. We have about 88,000 acre feet of water rights. As you might expect, the majority of that is in Lake Waco. We also have about 7,700 acre feet in the Brazos and some others in Wells. So as we think about these water supply opportunities, I think it's important for you to think of these in terms of a spectrum, and you see kind of two spectrums on the screen here. Left being a short-term, less expensive, and then moving to the right becomes more longer-term and certainly more expensive. And following along that same line of thinking here, the acre-foot impact follows almost the expense line and the short-term line, right? It's fairly cheap to do. It doesn't get you a lot of water. It's very expensive to do, and it gets you a lot of water. So think of the spectrum as we talk through these things. Immediate needs can be addressed in a couple of ways. We have some water through a contract with a Bluebonnet Water Supply that we could access fairly soon. Even if we were to get to some of the further stages that Lisa's talked about, we do have the ability to do emergency transfer pumps. For those of you who have seen fracking operations in the past where they have the large pumps and generators that fuel those pumps, pumping water across and over land, that's what we would do. We would take water out of the Brazos and pipe it over land, probably across U Parks and up to the DAF and to the lake. So, there's some emergency things we can do, and we are working through plans to do that and having discussions at the state level if in fact we have to do that. Water conservation is certainly a tool to use. In the Brazos G plan, I think by 2070 we were looking at around 12,000 acre feet total of benefit from water conservation. By 2070, in the initial years, that was less than 1,000 acre feet, and it's something that you build on over time. So we're not in a position to seize that 12,000 acre feet quickly. That was over a long-term plan. In the Brazos water rights I mentioned, we have about 8,000 acre feet. We need to transition towards a more permanent use of that water, and it requires a pump station and other things to bring the water out of the Brazos. And we'll have to put our heads together with some of our local experts and others around the state to think through, does that water go to the DAF, the dissolved air filtration? Flotation, I'm sorry. Where the water comes, right now the water comes from the lake to the DAF, it's treated there, and then it goes to our treatment plants for further treatment and distribution. The question is, when we take the water out of the Brazos, do we take it to the DAF or potentially even into Lake Waco for storage? Well, Lake Waco, we talked about in the summer, what happens to a lot of that water, it evaporates. So gallon for gallon, what you're pulling out of the Brazos and dumping into the lake, you're probably not getting a gallon back. At the DAF, Brazos water is different, has different qualities to it, different treatment mechanisms. So there's a limit to the ratio of water that we can mix at the DAF between lake water and Brazos water. And so those are things that require a lot of study from a feasibility perspective, understanding how the two waters mix, how they mix into the treatment process as well. So those are longer term solution. Again, though, we're talking about 8,000 acre feet of water. And then at the far end, there's an ability to do another pool rise at Lake Waco. Very expensive, as you think about the scale here, hundreds of millions of dollars to do that, and certainly the state and the federal government would be a big part of that. But I think the important point here with all of this is it's time to start not only planning for this, but implementing and spending dollars to make some of these things happen and doing what we can do with the water that we do have, and then talking about reusing some of the wastewater treatment effluent. And we have the large treatment plant that right now puts water into the Brazos. There's ability, as you've heard, for purple pipe programs and other reuse programs where that effluent coming out of the wastewater treatment plant goes back into the system. Right now it's into the Brazos and goes downstream for others to use. So there's ways for us to take that wastewater effluent and bring it back into our system so that we're using, we have the benefit of that water's usage into the future. And there's lots of different ways to do that. Costs money to do it. Takes, again, engineering design. And then thinking through, again, even with the wastewater effluent, You know, if you're just pumping it back into the lake, again, what's the gallon for gallon return in the hotter months of the year? So all of that comes into play, and it's something that as we move forward, you're going to be seeing more and more requests from the city manager's office and from the utilities department talking about these things and what we need to do to be prepared and what dollars we need to spend to start making ourselves prepared for it.
Will you speak to the timeline in terms of time, for example, to raise the lake? How long would that take?
I'll rely on Lisa here, but 20 years is what we've talked about from the time you start to end, and
Really thirsty.
you would, yes, sir. Yeah, that is not a quick fix at all.
What about some of these others? Is there anything that's?
Yeah, I think, and, you know, Lisa can jump in here too. I think some of these on the lower end are certainly easier to do and more, can be done more quickly. They don't achieve a whole lot.
So how quick?
So the Blue Bonnet water, that's March 1st. So we've
Quick.
already
Thank you.
taken off with that one. The emergency transfer pumps, we will probably, we're getting the right size of the pumps that we need so that we can order them because it is a 160-day, is that right? Yeah, 160-day turnaround on getting those pumps in. So
60 days, best case scenario or worst case scenario?
that's the best case scenario we're hearing. And so we want to get those. Those are large pumps. We want to go ahead and order them and, you know, hopefully we don't need them. But if we need them,
You'll have 'em.
waiting another 4 months to get them in is not ideal. And so we are working with an engineering firm right now to work on that. Water conservation, obviously we have some strategies in place right now, which is the 2 times a week watering has actually really reduced some of the outdoor watering that we normally would see in the summertime. But there are a lot of programs out there, and I would say that at some point in the future, we're going to bring back, I want to call it almost a shopping list of what could we do. Because there's a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of other cities that have already been in this position. We don't necessarily have to reinvent any wheel. We can go out there and grab what they've done and what they've seen to be successful. But the Brazos water rights, that one is a little challenging, but we've already begun talking to TCEQ, our regulatory agents, because this is an issue that they would be involved with. We've already begun talking to them about it and what that would look like. So I think we've taken some steps, but unfortunately, when you get nearer the end of those with the use of the Brazos water rights and the reuse of the wastewater treatment plant effluent and the additional 3 feet rise in Lake Waco, all of those take a lot more time. And so, you know, they just do. There's a lot of regulations involved with doing those.
Would you characterize any of these as being fast-tracked?
Yeah, the Blue Bonnet water is fast-tracked right now. I think the emergency transfer pumps, we've discussed fast-tracking that as fast as we could.
I think, Councilmember, on the others, you know, on one hand, you would say, hey, let's build a pump station and get the water out of the Brazos and put it into the DAF or into the lake. You know, and that's, you could fast track that. I think the question is we want to be smart about how we do it. And we want to make sure that we're not just pumping water from one place into another to evaporate, and we're spending millions of dollars and getting back 60% of the water we're moving. So we want to think through those kinds of things, and certainly in the civil engineering world, there's folks that can help us think through that and where is the best cost benefit of doing that. And the same thing on the wastewater treatment effluent. You know, you can have purple pipe systems and you can have pump systems that pump the water from the wastewater treatment plant into the system, but that requires essentially a secondary distribution system. And to what extent do you build that? Do you concentrate it only in a certain area? Do you expand it to others? And again, cost-benefit analysis of that. So, you know, there's some things that we're going to do in the short term, I think, and Lisa's highlighted those. But as we think about these longer-term solutions, yeah, it does require a level of analysis, you know, to really think through what is the smartest way to do this. And, you know, we've even talked about putting some of the water in the ground and pulling it back out later so that you get more of that 1-to-1 gallon ratio. And there's cost to that, as you can imagine. So I think in some of these immediate term solutions, we can do some things to take advantage of what water we do have today on a temporary kind of basis. But as we think longer term, I think it's real important for us to think about cost-benefit analysis to that, gallon for gallon return, and what makes the most impact. So that will require not only our team here, but others who have experience in this arena and can help us think through that. So as, you know, I think as we conclude here, you know, we want to talk a little bit about community impacts, and they're real. You know, if in fact we don't get water, as Lisa said, you know, car washes, golf courses, ball fields, folks who make their living power washing and building swimming pools and those kinds of things, you know, there will be an economic impact to that. And that's hard and that's difficult to think about, and the folks that could be affected by that, you know, even in your own home, you know, as the ground dries and shifts, your house shifts, and the brick cracks and the foundation shifts, and that same thing happens in the streets. Streets begin to crack, water lines shift and break, and we have more water line breaks than we had before. So all of this is tied together and related. And you know, we don't do a lot of crop irrigation here in Waco, but certainly that affects economic impact of agricultural businesses. And what does that mean? Well, that's higher prices for all of us when we buy groceries. So certainly economically, as we think about water shortages, there's impacts for us to keep in mind and consider. And you know, ball fields, for example, golf courses, you know, those are nice, but whenever we may not have enough water to drink and bathe with, you know, golf courses and ball fields tend to take a back seat. Environmentally, certainly droughts, windstorms, dust storms. If you've ever been out to West Texas, you're familiar with that. Prairie fires are more common, as we know. The drought monitor constantly reminds us of that. We're all aware of cracks in our yards and what happens there. And then you think about the lake and wildlife, and as the lake recedes, there's ponds of water left, and so you get fish kill and things like that because oxygen depletion in the lake. And then wildlife generally, birth rates go down, life expectancy goes down, or disappears. And we talked a lot about financially, you know, the impact of that. And as we think through these alternative systems like Purple Pipe, you see some of these systems here. Bottom right is a pump station that you might envision at some point, taking water out of the Brazos. Those are expensive. And then in the top right, there's a graph that the federal government has, you know, put out, and it talks about this idea of fit for purpose sorts of treatment, where you're not treating the water a certain way for everything. You're treating water differently for different uses, which sounds good, but it costs a lot of money. And so as we evaluate those kinds of things, you know, we want to make sure that we're thinking through the cost-benefit analysis of it, and also thinking about where is our use today, where is it going to be in the future as we move forward. And then last, and you know, I think we've all probably taken water for granted in our lives, right? There's been plenty of it, but as we begin to move forward, you know, we've had discussions about water restrictions generally, and for those of you who have family or friends or maybe have lived in the Metroplex or Austin or Houston, you know that twice a week watering is the rule all the time. And that's something that we're probably going to need to be thinking about. You know, is that where we need to go? And as we think about medians and highways, for example, you know, it's nice to think of Augusta National going down the middle of a street, right? And nice grass and flora and fauna in the median of the highway, but it takes water to do that. And you know, our lawns are probably going to brown more than we would like them to, and so we'll have to look at ways to treat that. And then
in that way, the borderoos are already ahead of the curve.
I understand.
We've done our part.
Yeah.
I've got a brown front yard and backyard.
It looks great, doesn't it? You just go out there every few weeks and paint it, right? And the last, and this is kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek here, but you know, we all want nice places for our kids to play, whether it be parks or ball fields or something like that. But you know, the expectation may have to come down a little bit in terms of what that means. You know, we want it to be safe for the kids, but it may look more like the Sandlot field than a Major League Baseball field, you know? But you can still have a lot of fun. You know, you can hit balls over the fence, that kind of thing. And you know, you can still have fun, but it may not be at the level that you might have wanted it to be before, simply because we just don't have the water to dump on the field. So, you know, all of those things, I think, are impacts of this as we move forward. And I don't want to make too light of the fact that water is going to make, rainfall is going to make a lot of this better. It will, right? But we now know that we can't just hope for rain, and even if we get it, say we're done. We know we got to think to the future now. And we're at that point, and Lisa pointed it out well in the history of Waco, there's cycles, right? There's times where you have to stop and take another look, and I think we're at that point. So in summary, historic lows in rainfall, historic lows in the lake as well, historic highs in terms of drought and severity. We're halfway through our drought phases now, and we'll be moving on if we have to. The water supply plans must be championed. We have to pay for them. We have to figure out a way to expedite them and implement them. And recognizing the community is going to be impacted. If we don't get water, yes, restrictions are going to tighten. There'll be less uses, and there'll be economic impact from that. If we do get water, we're still going to be impacted because we have to plan for the future and invest in the future. And investment requires revenue, and revenue requires rates to go up. And then the last thing I'll just close with, the strategic goal that council have of supporting sustainability. That's one of our strategic goals that council had the wisdom to put into our planning processes over the last couple of years. And this idea of sustainability, water's at the center of that. If you don't have water, you can't sustain anything, right? And economic growth, you know, just health and safety, those kinds of issues, you know, water is the building block of life, certainly. And so as we talk about sustainability, we've got to keep water at the center of that discussion always. So that's our presentation today. We wanted to bring this to your attention, and again, as Bradley said, raise awareness, not only where we are with lake levels today, but where we're going in the future, and the sacrifice, honestly, that will be required in any situation, any scenario, in terms of, you know, if we don't get water, there's sacrifice there. If we do get rainfall, there's going to be sacrifice for the future, and that's what, you know, that's what success really is sacrificing now for something better in the future, and that's what we want to get to. So that closes the presentation. We'll welcome any comments or questions you have.
Questions, comments by council?
I'm depressed. Totally. I can't lose any more. My grass in the front yard and backyard, brown.
If I had any hair, I'd set it on fire and run out of here screaming.
However, I'm like, you know, I do appreciate the looking forward, because we are going to have to make some realistic changes, just because the earth is changing, the world is changing. So we're going to have to make some adjustments to how we live. I trust that you all are studying the success stories of other communities who've had to do it before we have, and so we can ease into this as painlessly as possible. It will hurt. We need to get up our succulents game and see what that looks like. I mean, the freeze killed my Seiko, so I'm gonna have to start over because I don't know. You know, we are gonna have to make some changes, but keeping this level of information at the ready and palatable bites, because I don't expect our residents to become water conservation experts,
Right.
but that they know what it means if they don't. Not a fear tactic, this is just true. So I appreciate that.
I'll just chime in. Yeah, this data, which I love data, but this is very sobering, sobering data. And the different parts that you don't think about, because we think about, hey, it's got to rain on that lake, you know, but the bigger part comes from the drought. They've had a very serious drought over in our watershed for a number of years. And the evaporation issue that it really came to me, a big realization last summer when this kind of started, and we realized that half of the usage was the evaporation daily, which is astonishing. The slides that you had on the tributaries coming in and how we're less than, we're at the 100th% of what normal is. That's tough. And then I guess, Lisa, when you said some of these droughts were a result of 5 and 6 year length of the drought, and we're kind of only into year kind of 1.5-ish.
Right.
Not that, I was encouraged that the fourth quarter rain was not quite as, I look for a positive
Sure.
spin. The fourth quarter was starting to come back a little bit, but we'll see. The second thing I want to say is the response stages seem very appropriate to me. And I think that, not next month, but April, or maybe before then, going into that stage 3, people need to start looking at that and understanding the impact there at a residential and commercial level. And the third thing I want to say is the citizen response, just anecdotal, I guess not official or not a monkey survey or anything, but anecdotal response I'm getting from the citizens is positive. I think everybody sees and understands, well, the great majority of Wacoans understand that we're kind of in a once in a lifetime kind of a drought here, and whatever we need to do to conserve, I guess from the conservation perspective, I think people are ready to react and support our plan there. That's my feel. I liked what you laid out on page 220, kind of the different options, and these are big, some of them very bold options. Like the Brazos water rights, I think makes a lot of sense to be pursuing that. Adding 3 foot to the lake, I mean, that one sounds great, but like 20 years, and if it took, back in 1964, it took 50 million just to build the lake, and you put the 20 multiplier on that would be $1 billion, I imagine $1 billion to, is that about right, Bradley?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lake down near Houston, Allen's Creek, is that what it's called? Reservoir that BRA is pursuing, in the ballpark of our yield at $1 billion right now.
Yeah.
And it's plus or minus 20 years away.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not that big a deal, 3 foot, just whatever, but, so that one, conservation, I think that's, and as Councilmember Horner kind of, which ones can we do like immediately? I think that conservation is one. I like the way we're talking about the emergency, transfer pumps. And could we get, I don't know, an informal report on that, just to kind of see what that entails and the cost and the cost benefit as you introduce, Paul.
Right.
And the one that it's kind of people are going to have to get over it is the purple pipe or the effluent, piping the effluent back up into from the bottom where we ship it down to College Station. We gotta pump it back into Waco. I think it's going to probably make the most sense as technology now has made that a safer process. But the recurring theme on all these is they're visionary, they're expensive, and they're, steps that this council may have to take or at least evaluate, and we will take steps on a few of these alternatives. And just the last thing I want to say is this is a regional issue, and as Councilmember Bearfield pointed out, I know we're doing this, but what have other cities done when they're in this situation? But the regional issue, I like how you're working with BRA already. We've had some preliminary meetings with the county. The Chamber of Commerce has some infrastructure issues that they're dealing with, and I think as we all work together and solve this as a community in Central Texas, I'm encouraged by the solutions we can arrive at. Thanks.
Yeah, just to conclude, I share these concerns and perspectives of my fellow council members. Appreciate this thorough, data-driven presentation that's both short-term and long-term in its focus. I think past city managers and councils have looked at our water needs and have shown great vision into the future. I know that this council recently acquired some Brazos River water rights that was thinking kind of decades ahead, and hopefully we can continue that long-term focus. I know you often hear that water is the new oil or water is the new gold, and really with Texas population growth and the volatility of our rainfall and water supply, I think that it's important to continue that long-term strategic thinking. So great presentation. Appreciate all of the good hard work that staff is doing to get our community on one page with the problems we're facing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Council.
All right, council, if you'll hold with me for 10 more minutes.
Yep.
I think we've got a great dinner for you at the break. But hold me for 10 minutes. I'm going to invite Clint Peters up, and he'll cover, Clint, if you don't mind covering the planning public hearing items, and then if we have any time remaining in that 10-minute window, you can introduce the property item. See how far you get.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, Council. We do have 7 public hearings tonight. I'll try to cover these real quick. The first 2 are dealing with subdivision plats. The first one is final plat of the Gonzalez-Jones Edition, Lot 1, Block 1. This is somewhat of a unique situation. This is a single lot plat near Lake Waco. It's in our ETJ, so it's outside the city limits. It's a single property that was originally divided out in the 70s, but it was not platted back then, so they're coming in to plat the property, which does require it to have a public water source per our subdivision ordinance. It's in a dual certified area, so City of Waco can serve it, as well as the North Bosque Water Supply Company. There is a North Bosque water line right in front of the property. However, North Bosque Water Supply Company is currently not issuing any new taps because they're at capacity in their system. And so the other option is one of the other options is City of Waco water. However, our nearest water line is about 2.5 miles away. So here's the property. Here's North River Crossing that goes across the Bosque River, and to extend it would be about 2.5 miles. So they are asking for a variance to that subdivision requirement to not have to extend the City of Waco water. So that would leave them with options of, at some point, when North Bosque Water Supply Company has capacity, to get a meter from them, or potentially drilling a water well, subject to approval from the Southern Trinity Groundwater District, and then even potentially rainwater collection system to serve the property. So we are recommending, and the Plan Commission both recommended approval of the variance to not have to extend the City of Waco water to the property, and then approval of the plat. Our other plat for tonight is preliminary plat of Floyd Casey Edition. This is an exciting project that we're partnering for the old Floyd Casey football stadium site. This is the next step in that development process. The preliminary plat is consistent with the design book for Floyd Casey development and the development agreement with the city and the developers for the site. And Plan Commission recommended approval of the preliminary plat. Our next public hearing is a request from the Volkswagen dealership at 2301 Loop 340 Drive to amend their PUD plan. This is at the corner of Loop 340 and Bagby. They are wanting to add about 5,000 square feet to their building to accommodate some new service base. It will match the look of the existing dealership. And then you can see here where they're proposing to add on to the building. And then here's the look of it. It will be on this side of it. This is a look from the Loop 340, and then right here. Plan Commission and staff both recommended approval of this one. Our next public hearing, 125, is another PUD. This is for the Black Bear Village. This is a residential addition down south of LaSalle, between Gurley and Garden. This is phase 3 in the last phase of a residential development that has been developing since 2016. See the original plan here. All this is developed out now, and then they've added an additional almost 0.6 of an acres which is 7 buildings and 24 bedrooms. The concept plan was approved earlier last year, and then this is the final plan, and it is consistent with all our requirements, and both staff and the Plan Commission recommended approval of it. And then you can see here, this is the existing development, and then they're starting to get ready for construction for phase 3. Our next public hearing, 126, this is a continuance of a public hearing on a request from Encore Electric Delivery Company. This is for a new electrical substation in M1 zoning off of East Webster near the brick facility. This was continued. They were working on some design changes to the site to help screen the facility better from public view. This is real busy, and so I'm just going to try to explain what they did. Originally, they had the screening around the substation yard, and in order to better screen it, they've moved that screening out to basically the property line.
Okay.
And so that's what the main change is, and then they've had to adjust some of their drainage detention ponds based on that. And then you can see it better here. So the screening wall will be along the property line, and they'll have landscaping out of it to better screen it from the street.
And is that landscaping, the circles indicating landscaping on that?
Ma'am?
Or outside the line, is that indicating landscaping?
Ma'am, yeah. And then here's some examples of the screening wall, and again, it will be pushed out to the property line instead of right adjacent to the equipment.
Does this proposed kind of aesthetic fencing and screening meet the plan department's approval in terms of aesthetics?
Yes, we would, because this is a change from when the Plan Commission recommended, we do have an amendment to one of the conditions dealing with the screening, and so we'll read that in the record tonight, but yes.
Do they already have all the easements they need to make this happen? And the neighbors have been notified and that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. And you can actually see their big transmission lines run right through that area. So it's an ideal site for that. And we did notify all the property owners within 200 feet, and we did not get any feedback from those. Our next public hearing, 127, this is a request for rezoning at property at 305 North 29th Street, rezoned from R2 to O1 or O3, and then a land use designation change from urban residential to mixed use flex. This is a existing residential house in the Austin Avenue Neighborhood Association along 29th Street in between Columbus and Waco Drive. This is the land use plan. You can see that the yellow area is urban residential, so that's low density residential uses. And then this pinkish color is mixed use flex, so where you have the commercial uses. This map, and then the next map as well, shows this the residential area of Austin Avenue Neighborhood Association. It's kind of squeezed from all sides with commercial encroachment. You have Waco Drive to the north, Franklin to the south, and then further out to the west you have Valley Mills, and then to the east you have downtown. So you can see that land use pattern. Purposefully, the city, the comprehensive plan and city council has made it a point to keep office and commercial from encroaching into that residential area. So this is kind of, it shows that close up, and then looking further out from that area all the way out to Valley Mills Drive. So Valley Mills Drive's here, Franklin's here, and then Waco Drive's here. All that yellow is residential. You can see all the commercial and office along those main arterials all has frontage onto those main arterials. There's no encroachment of that into the neighborhood. And similar with the zoning, the yellows and oranges are low-density residential zoning, and then your purples and pinks and reds are the commercial. And you can see that same similar land use pattern where the neighborhood has been protected from encroachment from commercial and office land uses. And so here's the house here, and this is looking across 29th Street. And then, let's see, looking back towards Waco Drive. It is close to Waco Drive, but again, all those commercial and office uses have fronts out to Waco Drive, and then back to the residential area. It is right across from St. Albans Church, which is also in residential zoning. Federal law does protect residential, religious uses as a permitted use in any zoning district. So it is part of that fabric of that residential area and has residential zoning. So we did get a lot of input from both the applicant and with support of the request. A lot of that input was from people that were supportive of the specific use that's being proposed there, and a lot of it was from people that do not live in that area. But we also did get a lot of opposition from the neighborhood association and then surrounding property owners. There are four adjacent, go back to the map. There are four adjacent property owners to this property, and all four of those property owners either submitted opposition letters or spoke at the Plan Commission in opposition. So therefore, both the Plan Commission and staff recommended disapproval of this land use and zoning change. The vote was somewhat split. It was 5 to 3 in favor to disapprove the request. The Plan Commission's disapproval does trigger the supermajority requirement, so it will require all 5 of the city council members present tonight to approve it. We have received a request from the applicant to continue this to the March 21st meeting. And the council will have to approve that request, but the public hearing will need to happen first so that anybody can speak on both the zoning request and the request for continuance. And then the procedurals for approving a request for continuance will need 4 out of the 5 council members because it's the majority of the qualified and serving. So that number's 6. So we need 4 of you to approve a request for continuance. We have not got word yet. There is potential. The applicant is exploring the option of also potentially asking for a request to withdraw. If that happens before tonight's meeting or at the hearing, the council will need to have a public hearing to consider the withdrawal first. If the council decides to approve the withdrawal, then the case is over. The council can deny the withdrawal, and then we move forward with the case.
So, Clint, just to summarize, regardless if they're asking for a continuance, we can vote up or down on the zoning application. And regardless, if they're requesting a withdrawal, there needs to be a vote on the withdrawal, and then if that vote is to proceed and not to allow the withdrawal, we can also take up voting up or down on the ordinance requested.
That's
I'm
correct.
sorry, the zoning change requested.
Correct, and there is a difference between the two. So if the case is withdrawn, if the council approves a withdrawal, there's a 6-month time period. They'll have to wait before coming back with the same request. If the case is denied, then they have to wait 12 months. So there is some difference there depending on how the council votes.
Thank you.
And I will say, if it's a request to continue, that will need to be voted on as well. Either to continue it or to not continue it and move on with the case.
Thank you.
After the public hearing. Yeah. Any other questions on that one? I know there's a lot of moving parts on that one.
Clint, let me jump in.
Yeah.
If there is a request for the withdrawal, there will actually be a separate public hearing on the withdrawal part, to which you would need to vote yea or nay on that before proceeding to a public hearing on the actual planning item if you disapprove a withdrawal. So we have the potential of 2 separate public hearings if there's a withdrawal request.
So we'll just need to communicate that to the public to make sure that they understand that there could be 2 consecutive public hearings potentially in the event that they do request a withdrawal prior to the hearing.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then our last public hearing is an ordinance amendment dealing with STR, so I'm gonna play attorney here for a second. This change is in response to a U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit decision that struck down the City of New Orleans ordinance, which had a residence requirement that was deemed unconstitutional by restricting interstate commerce. And so Waco has a similar residence requirements for some of our STRs that requires the owner to be present when the guests are there. And so based on the decision, we are needing to amend our ordinance to comply with this court case. So what we're proposing is that we would remove the requirement for the owner to reside on the property, but we would still require that the owner or a designated operator be present on the property for those that require that requirement. So our short-term rental type 1s, which are allowed in our single-family zoning. And then we also are requesting a clarifying ordinance change to our STR type 3s. These are our multifamily STRs that are only permitted in our commercial zoning districts. Currently, it talks about a multifamily building, and we want to change that to where it would cover a multifamily building or multiple detached single-family dwelling on a single lot. And this would only impact the commercial districts. They would still be prohibited in our multifamily districts that are, surrounding Baylor University and some of our other areas. So it's real restricted to just the commercial zoning areas. And Plan Commission recommended approval of this change. And that's all we have on the public hearings.
Questions?
How many people or how many existing structures does this impact?
For the STR1s? Yeah. It's probably less than 100, probably about 70 or 80 that we have permitted right now. The STR1s will still require a special permit in single-family zoning, so those will still have to come to council for approval, Plan Commission and council for approval. And there's probably just ballparking about 75 of those already approved. But it would now allow either the owner or a designated operator to be present. So all the other STR requirements will still be in play.
Thank you. This is and that effort is attempt to effectuate the purpose of the short-term rental ordinance as it currently exists, but just to comply with the law that, as opposed to requiring the owner, it could be the owner's designee.
Correct.
Or kind of a designated person there. But that way, it still functions similarly under the ordinance, right?
Yes, it still meets the intent, but doesn't violate that court case that had the residence requirement on it.
Thank you so much. City Manager Ford, are we proceeding into executive session, or do we have any more items to take up as a work session?
No, we'll table discussion on property for our next meeting, and be ready for y'all to adjourn if you see fit.
And are there any items that council wants to pull off the consent agenda? I know I've got an affidavit of substantial interest filed in one of them, which I believe is Resolution 2023-146, which I think I can preside over that meeting but not vote. Are there any others that we want to pull from consent? Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I might, I'm going to actually ask the council to withdraw Resolution 141 for future consideration at a meeting likely in March. So Resolution 141, if you'll withdraw that.
Nope, sounds
All
good.
right, let's withdraw that one. So we will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 5:31 PM.
Notice is hereby given that the city council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. Real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072, and economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087. We are now in executive session.